Well, good morning. Thank you again for coming together for our monthly update with the campus. A lot of things to talk about, a lot of great things happening at the university, and clearly a lot of activity that's happening state and nationally that's affecting higher education. So I would like to give you just a little bit of a flavor. I can't cover everything that's taking place at the university right now, but I do want to start, as I always do, recognizing some of the great successes of our faculty members and staff relative to funding from outside sources to be able to promote their research or programs that they're running at the university. And this is a little bit of a tight time in funding, as you know. Right now, some of the federal grants that we expect to come through are a little bit delayed in the process. But Dr. Fazal, Dr. German, Dr. Lee, and Ruth Samara have all been recognized for their work and together brought in a little over $600,000 since our last update just 3 weeks ago. And I think that's showing a great deal of recognition of the work that goes on at this university. I do want to take a moment and let you know that we had a nomination and a review by the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Trustees has now recognized Dr. Brett Schofield with the designation of Distinguished University Professor. Congratulations, Dr. Schofield. This is in recognition of his lifelong pursuit of academics as a researcher, as an educator, and somebody who serves the community at large, as well as our students. Certainly, he is a renowned name in research and a highly regarded educator. We're thrilled to have Dr. Schofield and many others just like him at this institution. I had the opportunity last week to spend 2 days in Columbus meeting with our legislators, and during that time was able to share the experience with 4 of our students, and I see one of those students at least is in the audience with us today. This is with Senator Rogner, who is our local state senator, and Senator Rogner is also the chair of the Senate's Higher Education Committee. I think it was a great experience for our students. They had an opportunity to meet with many legislators along with me, and they had an opportunity to ask questions of legislators and the legislators to ask questions of them, to find out what was important to them, how they were experiencing higher education, and get a good understanding from them what was working well at the university. And of course, each of them asked what their future plans were, and many of them noted that their dedication was to serve the state of Ohio. So we're really thrilled with these 4 talented students. I encourage more of our students to get involved in the advocacy program. This will be one of the most powerful tools you'll use in your professional career. While as a physician, as a surgeon, I can operate on a couple of people a day, the impact that you can have on hundreds of thousands, or at the federal level, many millions of patients across the communities is incredible by one piece of legislation, or potentially changing a piece of legislation through your advocacy efforts. So I think this is critical, and I'd love to see this program grow. Big thank you to our government relations team for stepping this up and seeing the importance of it. The university focuses on weaving leadership throughout our curricula, and we're going to have a concerted effort on increasing that element of what we do, as the board has now authorized the strategic plan refresh. We'll be going over that in detail at the next campus update, but we wanted to save that until next month so that we could spend more time on some of the other issues going on today. They have authorized a change based on your input, a modification really of our mission statement to focus it into something understandable and memorable, which is simply NeoMed creates transformational leaders and improves health. And doing just this, the College of Medicine had created a badging system this year. And if you've not had a chance to go on to Pulse and learn about the great work of many of our students in leadership, I suggest you get on and do that. Many of them have had dramatic impact in taking the reins of finding ways to improve care access, care quality, or service to the community, and not small projects, but projects that have gone across the scope of 6 months to a year, and they've presented those, and they've earned this badge of distinction for the work that they're doing. I was also asked by students to better market who the student trustees are. The governor of the state of Ohio picks 2 trustees from our students who serve as non-voting members of the Board of Trustees. It's a 2-year term, and currently it's Omer Ashraf and the newest addition, Trinity Crunk. Omer will be coming off at the end of June. He graduates this year and will be going on to do great things. He's hoping someplace here in the Cleveland region, but certainly in Ohio. But they are the voice of the students on the Board of Trustees. So if the students need to know who they are, we want to show this more often so that they can reach out to them, share their viewpoints, and make sure the student voice is heard at every board meeting through their advocacy and sharing their communications. These 2 have been incredible partners at the university. Omer is finishing up a 2-year term, and Trinity is just beginning one. And the governor will be going through the process now of appointing a replacement for Omer from the ranks of our current student leadership. And those students all had an opportunity to apply. They went through a review process by their peers. And then we put a number of those up for the governor to choose who the governor chooses to put in place. William Carlos Williams is a national medical poetry contest that I'm told many years ago started right here at Northeast Ohio Medical University. This is a very impactful nationwide program. And though we started it, I understand it's been some time since a NeoMed student was one of the most recognized coming out of that program. And so on your right of the screen is Sarah Kahn. Sarah is one of our medical students here at the university. She won 3rd place for her poem entitled Ossified, which talked about her experience and the impact of the gross anatomy cadaver dissections as part of medical school experience. So a big thank you and recognition to Sarah. She continues to represent as a leader in a different form of the space that we practice in medicine. We have 4 other students who are leading Neovations, which is our medical innovation learning process and competition. This is an interdisciplinary program that brings students from across the region, across the state. And this year, we're looking at this really as a national and potentially international opportunity to bring really the focus on this campus and the work that we're doing. This team is working with states across the entire U.S. to bring those students here to compete with and against the university. We're looking forward to seeing the big impact that we're going to have. I invite all of you to join us on April 9th for that event, Neovations Bench to Bedside. One of the key things that we have to do at the university is make sure that we maintain our accreditation. Accreditation is really a stamp of excellence. It shows that we're meeting all the metrics required of us by an outside evaluator, and we need to have this in place. Unaccredited institutions do not receive the ability to get a stamp of approval from the Department of Education, and therefore typically are not able to avail themselves of things such as financial aid support for our students. The College of Pharmacy is going through theirs. They just had a mock site visit. I understand it was a very strong visit, but this process in April really begins heavily for them. And I know they're in great leadership with Dr. Kat Trump and her team that is making this will be clearly a success for us. For those of you who watched the weather carefully this weekend, many of us were under a tornado watch. The group that handles crisis management at the university feels this is our biggest threat as far as something really impactful occurring at the university. So we will be doing a tornado drill on Wednesday of this week. We ask you to take it seriously, to treat it as though it's real, because this is going to help guide our understanding of whether we're able to safely execute on a true tornado watch or warning, and then a tornado hit to take place at the institution. Our goal is to keep all of you safe, and running through these scenarios allows us to assess how we're doing with that. It's easy not to treat these as serious events when you know it's a practice, but the only way you're ready is by practicing as though it's real world. We do have our cultures, our community celebration. As you walked into the auditorium today, you saw flags representing the cultures of many of the students at this university. This is a celebration every year. I know this was something that was conceived in student services a few years back, and this has really been one of our top programs in celebrating the cultural heritage of this university. Thursday of this week from 5 to 7:30, if you're able, please join us outside the auditorium for doing it again this year. And this is a really critical time for our graduating students, both in the College of Medicine and the College of Pharmacy, that go through a match process for graduate education, residency training programs. In fact, the College of Medicine has one day nationally where this takes place, and it will be this Friday. And this is a very stressful time for our students. And one, they don't know where it is they're going to go and practice the next aspect of their career, and it's a big deal. As somebody who's a former med student, I know my two most impactful days were the day I got into my first med school, because then I knew I was going somewhere, and then match day. Commencement's nice, but this is a bigger day for our students typically. College of Pharmacy doesn't have a single day. They have a multi-week process, so it's a little bit harder for them to celebrate an instantaneous event like they're going to be doing in medicine on Friday for what will be an absolutely packed facility up in the news center. And today is the day that some students will have found out that they didn't match initially, and the team in the College of Medicine will work with them all week to help assure that 100% of our students get matched ideally by Friday's event. We know today that our initial match rate was 94%, which is really outstanding. Every institution goes through this, where they do a scramble process where they'll help students who didn't have an initial matchup between the residency programs that they ranked and the programs that ranked them. So if you see students in the hallway, especially over in the news center where this is taking place, and individuals look a little stressed, please reach out, be supportive and understanding, because this is a very trying time for students as they're excitingly awaiting the opportunity to find out where it is they're going to be going after they leave the university. Our Vitals program continues to thrive. This is in partnership or in collaboration with University Hospitals of Cleveland. Dr. Ted Technos, who is the head or the president of the Seidemann Cancer Center, will be speaking to us about leadership from his perspective. And of course, we are very close to commencement on May 3rd. Commencement is a big celebration of the success of taking a group of students across their entire degree process. For our graduate schools, that may be 1 to 2 to 3 years. For our master's programs, anywhere from 4 to 8+ years for a PhD, 4 years for the College of Medicine, 4 years for the College of Pharmacy. And soon, we hope in a few years, the College of Dentistry will be joining us. This event is always packed at E.J. Thomas Hall, and there are some key pieces that are always in place for it. So our keynote speaker, the commencement speaker this year, will be one of our graduates, Dr. Frank Pape, who is currently the chairman of plastic surgery and dermatology at the Cleveland Clinic. You may know his name. He's been a huge innovator, entrepreneur, and in fact led the team that did the first full face transplant here in the United States. Based on submissions for honorary doctorate degrees, the Board of Trustees reviewed the candidates and authorized one of those this year to also be Dr. Frank Pape. So we're looking forward to hearing his inspirational words as a graduate from our College of Medicine class of 1984. The other honorary doctorate went to Dr. Scott Becker. For those of you who don't know Scott Becker, he started Becker's Healthcare, which is a national platform for bringing together transparency in the practice of healthcare, especially at large healthcare institutions, sharing knowledge, and then also opening up that transparency window so that you know how health systems are performing, both from a quality standpoint as well as a funding standpoint, which are at risk, where are mergers occurring. His work in the landscape has really been groundbreaking. He also runs a number of other programs outside of the periodical to bring people together to try and find solutions to healthcare's biggest problems. One of the areas he's the biggest advocate for is how we can transform healthcare education to make it more accessible, more affordable, and more impactful. And the university will be engaging with Dr. Becker on this very item. He has provided a discussion at the Vitals Forum for his work, and he is also going to be coming in to meet with the students at our FIRE program a little bit later. Actually, he just did that, last month. I want to thank all of you who participated in Giving Week. The target that the Advancement Office was hoping to hit was $200,000. They exceeded that. A special thank you to those who created challenges that allowed us to really bring people together, to motivate them to invest in this university and the great work that we do. Really pleased with this. 197 donors contributing over $200,000 in unrestricted funds to support every aspect of what this university does, from our faculty to our students. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit more of an extension of the discussion we had 3 weeks ago. The image you see before you is not a copyright violation. I spent a little bit of time on ChatGPT as an old guy trying to learn how to use AI to try and create an image that I thought reflected some of the stresses our students are going through right now. The pathway in front of them is not even. It's a bit circuitous and treacherous. There's a haze of fog that we're all experiencing right now, and they're looking forward to try and figure out, how do we navigate this? Well, there are dramatic interpretation changes, new law changes at the federal level, and the same thing at the state level. I will tell you the same viewpoint is the one that we are experiencing as leadership at an institution. All of us who are here came here for a reason, and that reason is to support students and to do research, so both of those support that mission of creating transformational leaders to improve health. That's the reason we're all here. It's been a difficult time navigating over the last 3 weeks. And I'll say that the last 3 weeks have been especially difficult. If we make a misstep in the wrong direction, we fall off that ledge. And part of falling off that ledge could mean that we're getting an audit and a review by the federal government. And if you don't pass that review well, right now we're being told that you could lose all federal support, which not only includes things like NIH grants, but it includes things like the ability to provide financial aid for our students. And if that were to happen, the only way this university could exist is through a dramatic increase in tuition with no financial aid. And I think you would quickly understand that means that we become an institution that serves the elite. And that is not why we exist, and it's not what we do. So we have to be very careful about how we look at the current landscape, how we interpret it, and we need help in doing so. So I would like to just kind of go over the timeline with you on some of the decision-making that we've been having to go through recently. As I discussed last time, on February 14th, but that was a Friday, really it was the 17th that we started to register. We got a note from the federal government through the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Education, basically in a Dear Colleague letter saying, here's how we interpret current law. And that current law was both based on the 1964 civil rights laws as well as the Students for Fair Admissions Act. Now, these are interpretations, which makes it very, very difficult. We were unsure how to respond. So we spent time reaching out to general counsel or attorneys at public universities and private universities around the state of Ohio. And Maria Scheimer and her team also reached outside of the state of Ohio. We reached out to the Attorney General's office. I personally tried to reach out to the Office of Civil Rights to gain guidance. Unfortunately, they weren't responding to phone calls. Later, we learned that may have been because the Office of Civil Rights in Cleveland was actually shut down because everyone was laid off. So getting guidance on the interpretation had become very tough. Conservatively, we were told you should hold funding in certain areas that you don't understand, because if you're contributing to them, you may be in significant harm's way through the federal government coming in, reviewing you, and really putting in pretty significant barriers to us, including loss of funding. So we made some decisions at that time, mostly around student groups, that we didn't really understand well to hold. Now, about 5 days after I gave that presentation to you on the 24th of February, we received more guidance from the Department of Higher Education in the form of an FAQ. And in that notice, it said certain things were okay as long as certain things weren't also happening because of those, which became very, very difficult, again, to interpret. Yes, you can fund a group that's open to everybody, except when it violates current federal law, university regulations, or state law. And so this led us to go through the process of reconsulting more individuals from across the state and across the country. And then the university, especially the Office of General Counsel, Maria Scheimer, and I spent the next weeks going through thousands of pages of documents relative to the formation of charters for student groups, documents related to the charters nationally of the groups that they were tied to, and then follow-on calls with the Inter-University Council of General Counsels, as well as the State Attorney General's office. And after a complete review was done, we now feel comfortable that everything we are currently doing is in compliance with both state and federal law. So after a brief period of holding funds, all funds have been returned, and we'll continue to support those organizations as we always have. Now, there's a balancing act, so we're going to be establishing FAQs of our own to help guide student groups now and into the future, because there are some scenarios where we could find ourselves in a position that would be in violation of federal law. And so those FAQs will be important to do so. As an example, if a student group was viewed as a third-party means of circumventing the interpretations of current law, then that would be considered the university violating the law through a third party. And you may say, well, that seems like maybe that's esoteric. But on Friday, the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Education announced 45 universities across the country are now being audited for potential violation of a third party to circumvent race-based admissions. And that was through a partnership with a group called the PhD Project. One of those institutions is in our state, and it's got to be a very difficult time for them. There was also an announcement that 4 as yet unnamed medical schools were being audited by the Department of Education for potentially violating tying race to scholarship. Again, we're watching what's taking place. So these are not maybe there's a risk. The federal government is actively going out and reviewing organizations to make sure they're compliant with their interpretation of the law. There are a lot of lawsuits taking place around this right now. I do know that the National Education Association has partnered with the ACLU. This was in the press, and they are have actively filed suit against the U.S. government relative to the information that was in the Dear Colleague letter and in the FAQs. Many people think that this could be, or is, and others say it is not, a potential violation of First Amendment. If you follow the rules as outlined in precedent cases on this, then you're not in violation. But the interpretation of what is a violation is the content of that letter specifically. If you do a search, and I encourage you to do so to see what's taking place around this nationally right now, lawyers can't agree on what is okay and what is not okay. And with a very small but powerful office of general counsel, we have only 2 lawyers here. We are working hard to make sure the university is in a good place. And I know I've received some advice from individuals across our stakeholders here at the university to say the university should stand up in this direction or in this direction or right here in the middle. And I just caution you to note that you can say whatever you would like to say as individual citizens, but any stance that I take officially on behalf of the university could be putting a great number of you at risk. So we are very cautious about our approach to this and using all the advice and counsel we can to keep this university in a safe position and doing the important work that we do, which is staying on that path. And that path is defining how we can get our students successfully through their degree programs while taking care of the needs and supporting all of the students who make up this university, regardless of who they are and what makes them up, while also abiding by all state and federal statutes that we by law are required to do. So it's a difficult time of navigation. I thank you. As I noted in my letter to the community, I humbly ask for your grace and support as we navigate this process. Your input is important to us. One of the things that I did learn from our students, and I had a chance to meet with several of our students last week before the letter went out so that I could give them the opportunity to know what was in it before we essentially what would be the content before it came out, is that we need to do a better job with communication. Crisis communication is tough. Communicating too frequently is a problem, because if I learn something new the next day and I share that, and then the following day find out it was wrong and we have to retract it, there is a risk of over-communication. So we've been doing our best to try and get the information out when we know something that we feel pretty comfortable with. I don't know that we can ever be certain with any of the content that we're currently dealing with in this area. But to assist with communication, one of the things we did with our faculty some time ago was allow the university faculty council leadership to rotate at their discretion individuals to come to the Monday meeting. It's called the executive management team meeting, so that they have a voice. They have an opportunity to share what faculty would like to have us talk about, to answer questions about. And there are no secret meetings. So this is the meeting we use for general management of the university. They are there to hear everything that's discussed. We talked about this today after meeting with the students last week. We're going to open up a similar seat for the student council to pick one of their leaders. It could be the same one, or it could be rotating within their leadership, and also invite them to the very same meeting to do the very same thing. If it's difficult to find a time for them that works because they're students, they're in classrooms constantly, the alternative that we'll use if they're not able to attend is to take the meeting minutes and have the students schedule a separate meeting with the provost, who's responsible for students and faculty, to be able to go over the meeting minutes, the content, to hear their input, and for the provost to then share that at the next meeting. So we're trying hard to improve that communication piece. It's tough everywhere, but we are working diligently to be able to have something in place. For right now, the hold is off. All programming we feel comfortable with. But we do have some work to do ahead. As we went through the student charters, which are really outlines what they do and who they're affiliated with, we learned that at least one, if not more than one, charters were actually hadn't been updated in years. And one of those wasn't even a NeoMed charter. It was from a different university altogether. So we have some work to do. With that, I'm just going to take a moment to open it up to questions from the audience. I'd like to start here in the in-person audience before we open it up to anybody online.
Oh, there's it. You recently, or not you, but recently in the Pulse, they noted that there's going to be a change in anonymous questions, so that at the university updates, they will no longer take anonymous questions. So there's a new form online, but can you explain how those questions are going to be posted and the answers posted so that anybody on campus can see them?
So that, fortunately, was the brainchild of our Senior Vice President of Finance and Operations, Mary Taylor. And she has been getting a fair number of anonymous questions. What she does with them is she pushes them out to the content experts and asks them to respond directly. Mary, do you have an avenue in place for everyone to hear those questions?
Yeah, so depending on what the question is, most of the ones I've received so far have been anonymous. I did get one that an individual wanted to be contacted back, so I sent it on to the appropriate person to respond, and they responded directly to that individual. So depending on the nature of the question, we may put it in the Pulse, just run a response to it, or I may have you at a monthly update, just bring up that a question was asked, and I have one right now that came in this morning. I'll probably give you next month.
Okay.
So that's the process. They're all coming to me, and then I distribute them to the individual. The college, it went to the College of Medicine, for example. If it's something related that the provost should answer, I send it to the provost, HR, whomever it is, I will send it.
And we know this was done because not everybody feels comfortable putting their name out in front of the public when they ask a question. And we understand that. At the same time, you probably noticed that nearly every update, we would get the same 4 or 5 questions over the course of a 2-year period of time. That was it. We would address and address again and address again. And I get it. They may not have been at the last update, but if it's going to be anonymous, we thought this would be more respectful of everybody's time who already heard the answers to these multiple times in the past. Anything online? It looks like not. Yes, John.
Hi, Dr. Langell, I appreciate you sharing this. As a student, I think there's just a lot of questions. And so hearing these, like even a FAQ, I think would be really helpful. My question is just for clarification purposes. So just based on what you've shared, is it fair to understand that student activities or organizations that are currently active who haven't heard otherwise are approved to continue to do so at the school?
Yes, actually, the question, just to paraphrase a little bit more, is all the student groups who may have not have heard anything, are they all approved to keep doing what they've been doing? And the answer is, this took a couple of weeks, not only talking to experts, but thousands of document reviews, including all the student groups that we have here. And so, yes, we did not. Ultimately, there were 1 or 2 that we waffled on a bit, but we found a way to say, I believe this was the intent. And by doing that, we're fine with everything we've been doing at the university right now. Now, we do need to continue to have a process in place that reviews these and make sure it stays that way. So these all have to be open to everybody, and every organization we found has that open policy that everybody can attend. And it can't lead to this a segregation of individuals. It has to be open to everybody. It's just a key piece of what we're held to. If I could, so let me give you an example of things that are harder to figure out what to do with right now that were allowable in the past. So I would meet at least quarterly during a period of time when there was a lot of upheaval nationwide about, you'll remember the period, it was near the end of the pandemic where there was a big movement around equality of races, right? Something I hope everybody supports. And in doing that, I used to meet with our underrepresented in medicine students and pharmacy students together in a forum and we supply lunch because it was a time when they would have been eating and we were pulling them away, wanted them to come spend time telling us, how are things going? Are you getting the resources you need? Are you feeling heard? Are you valued? Do you feel like you belong here on this campus? And I thought it was a really useful forum, and it was interpreted to be legal. Now, it is not interpreted to be legal. We're being told by doing that, you are segregating a group on the campus because the invitation went to those who had identified themselves as underrepresented in medicine. And you're using university resources to fund lunches for a subset of individuals, not everybody. So that would have been considered something that we would be considered in violation of things like the SFFA. Again, I'm not an attorney, and we're doing our best to learn about this. So things like that, I'm just not allowed to do anymore. But we are trying to support this university and every student here, regardless of their makeup. So all the student groups currently, as we've done a review of many, many pages of documents, we feel very comfortable with what you're doing and that the university can continue to support those through student fees. And if you have any interest, there are over 100,000 pages of documents from cases in the courts that are available to read specifically on use of student fees and groups and how universities have to manage those. These cases go back as far as I can find to 2002, and there are a lot of them and a lot of interpretations. Our First Amendment is a 45-word sentence, and that First Amendment covers, as we know, 5 items of freedoms in the United States. But our forefathers wrote these in something that looks simplistic, but it is not simplistic. There are continued fights that have gone on since the existence of the Bill of Rights around every single one of the amendments to the Constitution. And there are reams, millions of pages of briefs and court findings from the lowest level federal courts all the way up to the Supreme Court. This is not an easy landscape for us to navigate. And again, I just ask you to bear with us. We are doing our best to stay in compliance while offering all the support services we can to our students, our faculty, and our staff. Seeing no questions online and none others here, I will remain behind for anybody who wants to talk to me privately. I didn't want to get up in front of everyone, but thank you again for coming. And I and all of us truly appreciate your support and your resilience during this period. Thank you.